Hello, everyone. Welcome to lesson 3 in our series on the Cold War. And we're looking at the wartime conferences that take place in World War II. So, this lesson, we're going to look at the second of them. This is the Yalta Conference. And by the end of the lesson, you're going to be able to explain the events, what was decided at Yalta, and the outcomes. What happens as a result of this? So just a reminder on the 3 wartime conferences. We have Tehran in 1943 that we looked at last lesson. This lesson we're looking at Yalta in 1945. And next lesson is going to be Potsdam in the same year. And if you remember, we're going to remember it as thank you, please. So Tehran, Yalta, Potsdam. We've done the T last lesson. We're going to do the Y this lesson. So just to remind yourself, what do you remember about the Tehran Conference of 1943? So just pause the video for a moment and then write down anything you can remember about the Tehran Conference. Okay, so you should have been remembering that it takes place right in the middle of World War II, and a lot of the issues were around Russia feeling that they were doing the brunt of the fighting, trying to get America and the UK to bring in a second front in France. You might have remembered about the promise that Russia would help America with Japan once the war in Europe was over, once the Nazis had been defeated. You might have remembered the issues with Poland, that Russia was given land from Poland, and that doesn't sit very well with the British. So, the official reason we get into World War II is the Nazi invasion of Poland. And you could also have remembered they talked about setting up the United Nations, which they're going to refer back to in this next conference. So we're now in February 1945. So we've moved on a bit. So we've still got the same people. So we've got President Roosevelt for America, Winston Churchill from the UK. And if you remember in the Tehran conference, the two of them agree on lots of things. They find it quite easy to reach agreements. And then kind of out on his own is Stalin for the Soviets. And again, if you remember in Tehran, very early on, those kind of tensions were creeping in. Stalin remembers a communist, Roosevelt and Churchill are capitalists. So, right from the beginning, there were tensions. They're just going to grow at this conference. So, we're in 1945 and we're in February. And by this point, the war in Europe is clearly going to be won by these 3 countries. So the Nazis haven't yet been defeated, but it's obvious that that is what's going to happen. So America and UK are coming into Germany from the west. Stalin's coming from the east. They know it's all over for the Nazis. So what they're discussing now is less about how the war is going to be fought and more about what is going to happen after the war in Europe. What's it going to look like once the war is over? So there are 3 important decisions that get made at Yalta. Number one, they agreed that they would officially create the United Nations and that Russia would join, would be invited to join. They would divide Germany into parts to be controlled by the different countries. And they would allow what's called free elections in Eastern Europe. So when people talk about free elections, they mean like not rigged in any way, that people go to vote and whoever gets the most votes wins. So there's no fraud involved. There's no one party putting pressure on voters to vote for them, anything like that. It's a perfectly fair election where all the voters are free to vote for whoever they want. So far, so good. So they agree formally that they are going to create the United Nations, the UN that we still have today at Yalta. So they are wanting to promote peace. So don't forget, they've just had 2 major world wars. So World War One starting in 1914, World War Two starting for the UK in 39. So people there within living memory had had two world wars. So they're really focused on getting along with other countries, promoting peace. They are sick of war. So aim there to prevent future wars and to protect human rights. So there's kind of growing in popularity, this idea, this focus on human rights. So that's something that the Soviets are going to be less keen on. They're more looking at that peace, that security, that not being invaded by Europe. So we get the division of Germany, and this is so interesting. It's going to cause so many problems in the future. And it really shows how much of a division there is between these people. So America, UK, and the Soviets, officially they're friends. They're all joined together to defeat the Nazis. They're meeting up, Tehran, Yalta. They're taking lots of photographs of them all sort of sat together smiling. But they just can't agree, even at this early stage in the course. And what they're arguing over is what's going to happen with Germany after the war. So Britain and America have the attitude that after World War One, the Allies were really harsh on Germany. If you studied this time period, you'll be aware of the Treaty of Versailles. It was incredibly mean on Germany after World War One, and it was a really big reason why Hitler gets so popular. So, what Britain and America are doing are trying to learn from their mistakes. They're learning from history. So they're like, we've tried being mean after a world war, it went terribly. This time around, let's just help Germany get back on its feet. Like, let's build some bridges between us. We're not going to punish Germany harshly. We're going to, obviously, Hitler's died, well, Hitler will be dead at the end of the war, but they talk about getting rid of the Nazis, how they'll get a government in Germany that isn't Nazi. So it's sort of those sort of very modern, very nice ideas. For the Soviets, they're like, that's lovely. That sounds really kind and sweet and wonderful. But who is going to be paying for all the damage done in Russia? So America hadn't had much bombing on US soil other than like Pearl Harbor. Britain, we'd had the Blitz, but Russia had had whole cities razed to the ground. And if you remember last lesson, we looked at the picture of Stalingrad. So the Soviet Union is very much like, well, it's easy for you to say that we're not going to punish Germany harshly because you don't have whole cities that need to be rebuilt. We do, and we want Germany to pay for them. So again, it's one of those things where you can see both sides of the argument. You can see where both sides are coming from, and they just can't agree. So what they do as proof that they can't agree, they go, okay, do you know what we're going to do then? We're just going to divide up Germany into different zones. And you can see the four zones on the board. So red is the Soviet zone, green for Great Britain, yellow the US, and blue is for France. So you, as your country, get to govern that little area. So the Soviets are going to use their zone of Germany to get money to send back to the Soviets. And further example of how much they can't agree. They've had to divide up Germany, but then the West are like, hang on a minute, Berlin is right in the middle of the Soviet zone, and you can see it on the map there. So the Soviets are, well, yes, that's where Berlin is. What, so, what are we going to do about it? It's not like we can move Berlin. The others insist that Berlin gets divided as well. And I think we're right to question if Berlin was in the British zone or the American zone, would the Allies be so quick to try and divide it up? So they don't like that Berlin is in the Soviet zone. They insist that Berlin get divided as well. And you can see the different colours there. So each country gets their own little zone in Berlin. And that is going to cause so much trouble. We are going to come back to Berlin again and again and again because of this decision. So, division of Germany, really important for showing that these so-called friends just cannot get on with each other. And then finally, these free elections in Eastern Europe. So, America and Britain want there to be elections in these countries. Whoever they vote for, that will be the government. If the people in Poland and Czechoslovakia and Romania vote for communism, then fine, but let them have a choice. Russia, absolutely not. They really want that buffer zone, that safety zone. So they say to Britain and America, this is going to be our area of influence. So an area that they can control. And I put for you there two examples. So Poland and Hungary both have elections that are rigged, they're not free, and they end up getting communist governments. Yeah. So Yalta. It's really important because it raises two issues that are going to be huge. And at the time, no one really appreciates how huge they are. So the issue of what to do with Germany, as far as they're concerned, they can't agree, but it's fine because they'll come up with zones. It'll be all right, but it won't be all right. They just can't see that. Number two, what to do with Eastern Europe. And there's a feeling, well, if Soviets are going to be feel that strongly about having their influence, maybe we'll just let them do it. But they just cannot find the common ground. That's the headline from Yalta. So they're deciding things that they don't realize are going to be hugely important down the road because they just cannot get on with each other.